My name's Sally Ann Garrett. I'm a highly specialist speech and language therapist, and I've actually been involved in the care of girls, women, boys and men with Rett syndrome since 1985. I've been a speech therapist for more than 40 years, so only part of my practice has involved people with Rett syndrome, starting off in Canada, where I met the first people that knowingly had Rett syndrome. So because the diagnosis wasn't made, prior to that I may have known people with Rett syndrome, but we didn't know that's what their condition was. And when we started off, the options that were available for intervention were really very limited. We were using graphic symbols already, bliss symbols or picture communication symbols were available. But in more recent times, and what we're seeing is the introduction of technology has made a world of difference, and I think that's where the future lies. Although there's always going to be the opportunity and the need for what we call the low-tech solutions as well. So as a speech and language therapist, what I've had is the opportunity to specialise because of the nature of the jobs that I've had. But if you are a speech therapist in general practice in the community, it's rare that you would come across a girl with Rett syndrome. So the problem with that is, how do you develop your expertise when you may only in your whole career see one or two people? The literature is still going to give a flavour of what's possible, but there has not actually been very much of a focus on speech and language therapy intervention and what's effective, so knowing what works and what doesn't. A lot of clinicians will rely on their previous practice with other children with other kinds of disabilities. So for example, if you have a child who's non-speaking, quite often the solution will be to look for a simple tech solution using switches or a system of communication that's called PECs. And both of those require hand skills. The girls with Rett syndrome don't have those hand skills, and so that's not the most effective route to be using. But if I were to offer a choice, do you want this or this? Or should we read a book? Yes or no? Then that's a simple way to get a response, because what the girl will do is look at, she wants the book, then she looks at my hand that said yes. So parents can set that up, and I've seen some of the parents here at this conference using that technique. It's a very simple way and doesn't need any specialist equipment. So the cost of intervention is something we have to look at as well. So if we're dealing with a young child who's referred to services while they're school age, usually the school service is provided for free. But if you have a woman with Rett syndrome, an older person with Rett syndrome, then access to speech and language therapy can be problematic because they're not necessarily eligible for services. Some states may have specialist learning disability services, but again it would be for those speech therapists working in those services whether they've had the experience of working with an older person. Personally, the oldest that I've come across was a woman who was 75. So life expectancy can be really high for these people, but many of the individuals of that age have never had access to speech therapy at all. However, interestingly, even the older ones, when we introduce the concepts of the eye gaze technology in a clinic situation for assessment purposes, even women who've never had access to symbols, some of them manage to be able to convey wishes and desires using symbols through the eye gaze technology. So somehow they've absorbed all of that learning over the years. I suppose when we think about the future, there is this excitement about the possibilities of a cure for Rett, and particularly Mia Otram's presentation about having the girl in the best position she can be in, so that when the cure comes, her likelihood of benefiting will be greater. In terms of communication, it's hard to see what effects that would have because there is so little research of other types of interventions to base it on, to know what's effective and to know what's the best way to work to get the girl to that optimal position. But certainly what we're seeing is with the use of the eye gaze technology, and this is part of the research projects that I've been involved with in recent times, we know from a study we did in UK in the clinics, giving girls access to the technology, we recorded results for 122 girls, and there were only 2 out of that who were not able to utilise the technology in some format. So that shows us, I think that's going to be the best route in for access to independent communication. A lot of other forms of communication require somebody else to be assisting and helping the girl with for example, with the Toby communication system, the I-series. The girl can wake up that device on her own. She doesn't need somebody to switch it on to be able to have a conversation. She can wake it up by looking at it, and then she can independently ask for somebody to come and help her to get dressed or whatever it is that she would like to be able to do next. But we're seeing girls who are developing literacy skills through eye gaze technology, who are able to type. We don't know what the world's going to be like for the little ones, but starting off with eye gaze technology at an earlier age, we can only see it's going to be beneficial. My personal research and the background from where I've come from, the initial research projects I was involved with was in epidemiology, looking at the knowledge base of people in the community who had come across Rett syndrome. What do they know about it? And we found even some of the neurologists and paediatricians had never even heard of the disorder. I hope that's changed. I mean, that was a project that we did in mid-80s, early 90s in Ontario. But so it is more widely known, but the families still struggle with being able to get a professional to really know what's the best way to help their daughter. I think the most important thing, and because this is the tricky part, if we have a conversation, you and I have a conversation, I say something, you say something back. We take turns with this ball, in a sense, of the words that we're using, going between two people. One person says something, the other one responds. When you have a daughter with Rett syndrome, she may have words to begin with, but if she loses those words, it's very hard, because as a parent you talk and she doesn't give you a verbal response. You say something else and you don't get that feedback. And the unfortunate thing that happens with parents is that they then stop talking to their daughter. They still take care of her, they'll do things for her, but they don't have the same kind of ongoing communication, because it feels a bit like playing darts. And what we want is what we refer to perhaps as the ping pong effect. So being patient and waiting, because sometimes the response the girl gives is very subtle, and if you're jumping in straight away and asking again, I've watched people, they want their daughter to point to something in a picture, so that they'll say, "Where's the rainbow?" And she doesn't respond, and so they ask again. But the problem with that is, the more times you ask, you're interfering with her own motor planning that she's trying to do, where she might be able to reach out and touch the rainbow. But if you ask her the question again, she has to start her response over and over again. So that's something. I've seen girls where I've asked a question, and what I do is I wait expectantly for a response. So I'm not going to say that question again. I'll ask her something, and I wait. And the way to do that is to keep face-to-face contact with the girl. Don't look away and go, "Oh, she's not looking," because now you've again broken her thought pattern. So you maintain your eye contact, maintain the face-to-face aspect of being with her, showing that you're interested, and wait for the response. And it can take up to 6 minutes sometimes before you get there. That's an awful long time to be sitting waiting. Normally I say something and I might give you milliseconds before I expect you to respond. Absolutely, and so that's a huge strength for the girls, is that they are so sociable, and engaging with people is a strength if it's done on their terms. The hard part is they can't, if they want to talk to you, they can't call you over. I did something funny at a presentation I did a long time ago in Ottawa, where I had an audience like we've got here today, and I stood at the front and I didn't say anything to say, right, I'm ready to start. I just looked at people, and they just went on talking amongst themselves and weren't really taking any notice of me. And then suddenly one of the people in the audience who works in the care home said, "She's trying to be like a girl with Rett," which was, I was trying to get them to engage with me with my eyes, which are silent. And we're used to people being able to make a signal, a vocal signal, a sound. So occasionally the girls learn to do that by screaming, because a scream is something that some of them manage to generate. But that's socially not acceptable. So a scream becomes something, it's a tool the girl can use, but actually it's not something we would really want to reinforce in her behaviour pattern. So catching that visual regard she's doing, her initiation of a communication through her eye gaze, is her way of doing it. And so we as parents and as carers, they need to tune in to those subtleties of how she is communicating already, what it is that she's doing with her body, her physical skills that she has, which are going to be limited, but what it is that she's able to tell you and how you tune into that.